invasion of Turkey, which is ridiculous.
Ambassador, will the cessation of hostilities go ahead this week? Is it possible?
It will take, yes, it's,
Can you raise it a little
it
bit?
takes, so, secession ceasefire is something
Tilt this. Tilt the mic.
Russian leaders are co-sponsors of UN process resolution decisions. That's why we are
Thank you. Just now we are finished our closed session. And the first issue, first of all, I would like to take a moment to pay homage to the memory of Mr. Boutros Ghali, who served the organization at its sixth Secretary General. We are really sad about that, and I pay respect for the legacy of Mr. Boutros Ghali. The Security Council has finished the closed session, and the first issue was about Yemen. The first time we are discussing about the humanitarian situation in Yemen. We expressed deep concern about the dire humanitarian situation in Yemen, which continues to worsen, recognizing that over 80% of the population requires some form of humanitarian assistance. Expressed particular concern at the food security situation, with over 7 million people suffering severe food insecurity and a double in the number of children under 5 who are actually malnourished. The Security Council welcomed ongoing effort of the United Nations to deliver assistance throughout the country under challenging conditions with ongoing conflict and called for generosity and early commitment to the 2016 Humanitarian Response Plan. The Security Council urged all parties to fulfill their obligation under international humanitarian law and their commitment to facilitate the delivery of commercial goods, humanitarian assistance, and fuel for civilian purpose to all parts of Yemen, especially as well as urgent measures to further ensure rapid, safe, and unhindered humanitarian access. Finally, the Security Council stressed the urgent need for commercial shipped food, medicine, fuel, and other vital supplies to continue to enter Yemen through all of Yemen ports without delay as an humanitarian imperative because of the heavy dependence of Yemen and its people on imported food and fuel. During this session, Mr. Stephen O'Brien was discussing with a member of the Secretary General about this. After, as a AUB, calling for the Russian Federation, we discussed about the Syrian situation. The member of the Security Council expressed the concern about the Turkish attack in the north of Syrian territory. We received a letter from the Syrian government expresses the concern about this violation, and all members of the Security Council are agreed to asking for the Turkish to comply with the international law. Also, the member of the Security Council, we still commitment with the Munich Agreement, and we expecting the support that all parties has been involved in the discussions, and we are working, or they are working, in the methodology for ceasefire and to allow the humanitarian access for every place in the Syrian territory. We are expecting to have the next meeting with Mr. de Mistura, retaking the peace conversation on 25th of February. You have some question?
Mr. Ambassador, as you know, Russian planes hit hospitals and schools in northern Syria, and some member states said that this could be a war crime, what's happening in Syria. Did this come into discussions? Did you guys talk about it in the council? Thank you.
Yes. We discussed, but the Security Council have no agreement, no consensus about that, because it's different source of information about that situation. Of course, yes, everybody is concerned about the bombing, airstrikes over the humanitarian installation, as the same in Yemen, as the same in Gaza and Palestine, and as the same in Afghanistan. It's not possible. But we are trying to have more information, and also we discussed that all the process in Syria have to be under the international law and respect especially the humanitarian international law. Thank you.
On Yemen, I wanted to ask you a question about the Yemen briefing. Stephen O'Brien said that there was a ship that was stopped by Saudi Arabia from getting to Hodeidah. Did this come up, and what did people think about it? And was there any discussion of the talks beginning again? The UK ambassador said they might begin next month. Was this discussed at all?
Yes, exactly. We talk about this. Was a ship from the United Nations, and that's not be able to be inspected by anybody. And well, we are trying, the member of the group of Stephen O'Brien are trying to clarify with the Saudis and to avoid in the future any other kind of situation like this.
And on the talks, was there any discussion of the political track of Yemen?
Yes, tomorrow we are going to discuss in the political issue, and of course we are trying to work in the political conversation, and let's see tomorrow what information we receive.
Could you confirm that all 15 members of the Security Council did express concern about what Turkey was doing in Syria?
Yeah.
Was a unanimous agreement of the 15 members?
Yes. With some different levels of concern, as you know, but everybody's agreed that it's not possible.
Did you discuss any further action by the Council regarding the Turkish involvement in northern Syria?
Well, we are following the political situation in Syria. One of the issues expressed by some countries, including Venezuela, is that the Kurdish people have to be included in the discussion. And that is the principal concern of Turkey. But we have to handle, we have to avoid that the Kurds have to be represented in the peace process. And then let's see, we are going to continue monitoring related with Turkey action. Some members expressed the action to talk with the permanent representative here, in order to have some dialogue and to avoid and to call the Turkey to avoid that kind of situation.
Ambassador, a couple of days ago you were talking about the possibility of adopting a text, some reaction of the Security Council to the meeting on Munich, to the Munich agreements. So what are the prospects right now? The date of the ceasefire in 1 week, in 1 week's time, it's coming closer, and will there be any reaction to that? Thank you.
Well, really, you know that it is not under our control. It's just few members of the Security Council that has been involved in this process, and we are waiting for the information. But in the political sense, the Security Council support the process, and all of us is waiting for have some ceasefire to relieve the humanitarian situation. But the parts have to be agree of the methodology to implement this ceasefire.
Mr. Ambassador, now the Turkish government says that the Kurds, the PYD, should be included, but they should be on the side with the Assad regime. Have you, as a president of Security Council, brought this to the attention of the Syrian government so that the PYD sits with them at the table instead of with the opposition? Thank you.
Well, we really are not, we don't have that capability. It's just Mr. de Mistura who is in charge of the process, who is decide in agreement with the other party who we sit in the table. We just call to have everybody included, because the process at Geneva in the past, one of the problems has been this: it's not the right person on the table. Then we're trying to include, but something important is the Kurds. They are fighting against the terrorist group on the ground, and then this is an important factor for everybody. Yeah.
Did Mr. de Mistura, did you hear about his visit to Damascus, about Mr. de Mistura, and do you know if he discussed these political issues during his visit, or he just discussed the humanitarian issues that are related to access to humanitarian aid?
The above situation there. He's discussing the political preparation for the next round of discussion in February 25, and also the humanitarian situation in order to agree how to facilitate. And we received some information that the government of Syria is facilitating some access for some place. Well, thank you very much. We have this afternoon, as you asking, the agenda always, we have UNAMID and also AUB about Palestinian situation. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. You have just heard the President of the Security Council, Ambassador Rafael Ramirez, explaining to you that the Security Council held closed consultations with regard the Turkish aggression against the sovereignty of my country, Syria. You have heard him saying that the members of the council have, all of them, expressed their concerns with regard this Turkish flagrant violation of the sovereignty of a sovereign member of the United Nations. The members of the Council, some of them went even that far to condemn the Turkish irresponsible behavior towards my country, Syria. But all of the members, including those who have supported and spoiled the Turkish government's policies, wrong policies towards my country, have expressed their concerns with regard this irresponsible, provocative Turkish behavior. You may remember that we kept sending letter after letter to the Security Council for the last 5 years, drawing the kind attention of the member states about the Turkish government involvement into the domestic affairs of my country, Syria. The Turkish ambassador, the current one and the one before him, kept denying any responsibility of the Turkish government with regard these accusations. Nowadays, even the closest ally of Turkey, meaning the United States, France, Britain, have expressed today their concerns with regard this Turkish escalation represented or translated into military acts, military aggression against my country. We sent a previous letter on the 2nd of February to the members of the Security Council regarding the same kind of Turkish irresponsible behavior. And today we sent another letter. So in only 10 days we sent 2 letters regarding the Turkish government escalation towards my country. And we asked the Security Council to act appropriately and accordingly in order to hold the Turkish government responsible for this aggressive act in light of the provisions of the Charter in these cases. The Syrian government reserves its rights with regard all kind of compensation, and we hold the Turkish government responsible for all these acts of aggression and escalation towards my country. So the story isn't finished yet. Finally, the Security Council decided to hold closed consultations today. And as I told you, as I have just told you, and as the President of the Security Council has explained to you, there is a kind of unanimity within the Council with regard expressing concerns vis-à-vis this Turkish irresponsible behavior and aggressive act of violation of all kind of international law principles, as well as the provisions of the United Nations Charter. We will keep continuing our pressure on the Council to react accordingly, to take concrete measures, to hold the Turkish government responsible for this huge escalation in the area, an escalation that would spread all over the area and would implicate a wider range of war and conflicts in the area in such a way that may threaten the peace and security in our area, not only in our area, but in the whole world. Turkey is trying to pull everybody into this nightmare, into this escalation, so that the Turkish government wouldn't be alone in this deterioration of the situation. Nowadays, everybody knows what's going on in Syria. The Turkish government is responsible of trading with ISIL, buying oil, gas, and artifacts from ISIL, facilitating the movement of this trade, illegitimate trade of artifacts and gas and oil through Turkish territory, ending into some European capitals and Israel. So the story is over, the game is over. The Turkish wrong policies and irresponsible policies are very well known to everybody, and it's time to put the Turkish rulers at the seat of confession in front of this Security Council. I'm in your hands.
بالعربي العراق يعني يشارككم نفس الموقف في شأن التدخل التركي في العراق. هل تنسقون موقفكم مع الحكومة العراقية، وهل تعتبر أن لدمشق وبغداد نفس الموقف في شأن التدخل التركي؟
طبعا نحن نواجه، السوريون والعراقيون يواجهون نفس التهديد المتمثل الإرهاب المدعوم سعوديا وتركيا وقطريا، ولذلك نحن منخرطون سوية في نفس الحرب ضد الإرهاب. ربما التكتيك يختلف، لكننا مع ذلك أنشأنا غرفة عمليات مشتركة في بغداد كما تعرف، رباعية سورية عراقية إيرانية روسية. هناك ضغط أمريكي على الحكومة العراقية لمنع هذه غرفة العمليات هذه من أن تأخذ مداها الكامل في محاربة الإرهاب، بمعنى أن هناك من يبتز الحكومة العراقية في هذا المضمار، لكننا ننسق بطبيعة الحال مع الحكومة العراقية، وانتصارنا على إرهاب داعش وجبهة النصرة وكل أخواتها هو نفس الانتصار، سيكون انتصارا واحدا للشعبين السوري والعراقي.
Mr. Ambassador, some of the council members that you just mentioned a couple of minutes ago said that the aerial attacks in Aleppo could amount to war crimes. Do you know exactly who bombed these hospitals and schools, as the Russians say they did not do it?
The whole war wouldn't amount to a war of a crime war or a crime against humanity. The whole war against Syria is a war crime and a war against humanity. Economic boycott, taking the form of unilateral economic coercive measures for 5 years, blockade, all kind of boycott has been implemented by these aggressive countries towards my government. And by the way, they are the same countries supporting the armed groups and the terrorist groups operating in Syria and Iraq. So definitely we have credible information that the so-called alliance led by the US-led alliance struck the hospital in the northern part of Syria. But of course, as usual, the easiest way for them is to trigger a hostile campaign against the Syrian government within the media, to accuse and defame the Syrian government or our allies, the Russians, of doing so and being behind such criminal act against a hospital. By the way, since you are fond of this story, the so-called hospital was installed without any prior consultation with the Syrian government by the so-called French network called Médecins Sans Frontières, which is a branch of the French intelligence operating in Syria. So they assumed the full consequences of their act because they did not consult with the Syrian government and they did not operate with the Syrian government permission.
Are you saying that the Americans did it, Mr. Ambassador?
طبعا كان هناك إجماع نادر في مجلس الأمن الدولي على الإعراب عن القلق مما يجري على الحدود التركية أو السورية. كيف تقرؤون هذا الإجماع وهل يمهد لتفاهم أكثر أو ضغوط على الحكومة التركية لكي تتوقف عن عدوانها على الأراضي السورية؟
هذا الإجماع الذي تحقق اليوم في مجلس الأمن هو إجماع نادر الحقيقة، لكنه ذو دلالة. لأول مرة يجمع أعضاء مجلس الأمن بما في ذلك حلفاء ورعاة السياسات التركية الخرقاء في منطقتنا تجاه سوريا والعراق. إذن هذا مؤشر هام وذو دلالة. مع ذلك نحن دأبنا على إرسال مئات الرسائل إلى مجلس الأمن على مدى السنوات السابقة حول ضلوع وانخراط الحكومة التركية المباشر في رعاية الإرهاب في بلاد سوريا. رعاية الإرهاب تحت عدة أشكال: رعاية الإرهاب بشكل مباشر من خلال دعم داعش والسماح لداعش باستقدام قطعان المرتزقة من أطراف العالم ممولة بالمال الخليجي وطبعا السعودي القطري بشكل رئيسي، والإرهاب الآخر المتمثل بشراء النفط والغاز والآثار من داعش والإرهابيين والمنظمات الإرهابية الأخرى العاملة في سوريا. اليوم انكشفت اللعبة، اليوم انكشفت القصة بالنسبة لضلوع الحكومة التركية. حتى أقرب حلفاء النظام التركي أدانوا التصعيد التركي والعدوان التركي على السيادة السورية.
Ambassador, I want to ask about a follow-up on that. This is clearly a unique, unanimous position. As you said, Syria sent hundreds of letters of concern about international, other countries' military activities in Syria. But how you explain this support by the US and her allies? That they did that because Turkey attacked PYD and the Kurds? Because other countries, when they attacked ISIS, we didn't see the same unanimous. How Syria explains this unique?
It might be a conflict of interest for the American policies, but this is part of the story. The other part of this.
Explain that conflict of interest.
The conflict of interest, meaning that the American administration is supporting one of the Syrian Kurdish faction operating in Syria, while the Turkish government is criticizing this kind of American policies and asking Washington to reverse this support. By the way, these Syrian Kurds supported by the American administrations are also supported by the Syrian government, just for your kind information. So the victories achieved in the northern part of Syria, both by the Syrian army and the Syrian Kurds, is a joint victory for all the Syrians. Everybody is benefiting from the Syrian army direct support. So this is what I mean by my previous statement.
Mr. Ambassador, why can't PYD join
May I
the
please,
government during the negotiations? Why can't the PYD join the government during the negotiations instead of joining opposition? Because the opposition say they don't really see PYD as part of them, and they see PYD affiliated with the government.
Which opposition?
Well, the Syrian High
We
Commission.
have 1,000 oppositions in Syria, so be specific. Tell me which.
The ones that are actually representing the Syrian people in Geneva.
In Geneva, there were dozens of oppositions.
Well, that umbrella doesn't see PYD as part of them. They see PYD as part of the government.
No. Tell me specifically who you are referring to.
The opposition group that is representing.
Naming the name.
The high committee, the high opposition group. That
Okay.
Yeah.
Then continue your question.
they say that they do not see PYD as part of opposition because PYD is acting with the government. So instead, the government should take PYD with itself and come to the table with PYD. My question is, if PYD is to be part of the conversation, why can't the government take them along?
A national opposition wouldn't support the enemies of the nation to align itself with the Turkish wrong policies towards Syria. Number one. So you cannot be a national opponent or national opposition, genuine national opposition, while supporting the Israelis' policies in the south and supporting the Turkish policies in the north and the Saudis' policies also in the eastern part and the south of Syria. So when you say, this is why I ask you to be specific while talking about which kind of opposition you are referring to. I mean, it's for you, this is the name for you. For me, I need you to be more specific. However, whatever this opposition you are referring to, it should defend the interest of the nation, not the interest of Saudi Arabia or Qatar or Turkey or anybody else. Then we will take it seriously and I will answer your question.
I wanted to ask, Stefan de Mistura has been obviously in Damascus today. Can you have any readouts of what was accomplished either on humanitarian access?
We haven't gotten yet any report from the capital.
And before too much time went by, I wanted to ask you, Secretary General Ban Ki-moon was quoted or seemingly quoted in the Financial Times talking about why the talks in Geneva were put on pause. Then he said he was misquoted. Do you take that at face value? Do you think he actually said that and then backtracked? What's your view of it?
Well, I think both the Secretary General and the Special Envoy have tried to cover up the Riyadh delegation irresponsible position during Geneva talks. They should have disclosed to the public opinion that the Riyadh group was responsible of adjourning the talks, the indirect talks. Nobody would know the truth more than myself. I was there, I talked to de Mistura, and he explained to me himself that he decided to suspend the talks because he knew earlier that the Riyadh group decided to withdraw upon of course, to withdraw from Geneva before even engaging into the indirect talks. So he decided to save what he called the dignity of the United Nations and his own dignity by blaming himself rather than blaming the Riyadh group. Of course, he wouldn't have been able to blame the Riyadh group because otherwise he would have to face the Westerners and the Saudi and the Qatari and the Turkish blackmailing positions with this regard. So he was somehow obligated to suspend the talks and save the face of those who were reluctant and hesitant to engage into the indirect talks. Somehow, some people in this organization are trying not to blame the Saudi policies, the Turkish policies and the Qatari policies. Some people, I mean, the same people would prefer to blame the United Nations or blame themselves rather than putting their fingers at those who are really responsible of freezing or suspending or adjourning the indirect talks at Geneva 3.
So when you said, I think de Mistura said petty procedural issues, that's what he was referring to. That was the code word, or?
We spent a whole week discussing procedural matters. We didn't get into the substance. And when I say we, I need to be precise. I mean here by we the Syrian government, the Syrian Arab Republic delegation present at Geneva, because the other sides did not engage into any indirect talks with the special envoy. The delegation of the Syrian Arab Republic was the only delegation to engage twice with the special envoy. Other delegations did not even go to the Palais des Nations in Geneva. The special envoy was unable even to form delegations of oppositions to deal with the delegation of the Syrian Arab Republic. We didn't know where are these ghosts we are supposed to deal with. We didn't know how many delegations there should be there. We didn't know the names. And the last day, couple hours before we left Geneva, the deputy of Mr. de Mistura came to me at the hotel and gave me partial list of names, not the full list of names. So indeed, there were too many procedural obstacles and problems, structural problems related to the organization of these indirect talks. The organization was very bad, procedurally speaking. We went into a rush to Geneva without even preparing the ground for undertaking and conducting serious indirect talks. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ambassador. How hopeful are you to get the ceasefire active by the end of the week? And also, could you please comment, the UN today said that they're concerned of the use of cluster munitions, both in Syria and Yemen. Who is using cluster munitions in Syria?
Who is supporting the terrorists and who is giving them all these sophisticated weapons to counter the Syrian army advances everywhere in Syria? Those who are behind the terrorist groups are getting hysterical because of the Syrian army advances everywhere at all the fronts. So definitely we have provided all kind of information, credible information, evidences that corroborated what you are saying. The Turkish regime has even allowed terrorists to smuggle sarin gas recently, just yesterday, and I forwarded this information today to the Security Council members. So they wouldn't even hesitate using any kind of illegitimate weapon to embarrass the Syrian government and its allies, and to defame and accuse the Syrian government of doing irresponsible acts similar to those perpetrated by the Turkish regime and the Saudi regime. We are really very, concerned with regard to this irresponsible behavior, mainly speaking by this trilateral criminal alliance, Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Qatar. The Turkish government, as I have indicated at the beginning of my statement, is behind a flagrant aggression against the sovereignty of my country. And this is why all the member states today expressed their concern. Many of them condemned the Turkish escalation and the Turkish aggression against the sovereignty of my country. So this is why I said the story is over. No more secrets anymore. Declaring a ceasefire would take much longer than a week. The people gathered in Munich adopted a resolution, and they should assume the consequences of the implementation of this decision. Such a decision cannot be theoretical. They need to be practical while deciding such thing. And who would guarantee that the terrorists would would respect the so-called ceasefire? And what kind of ceasefire are we talking about? And why the same declaration has referred to this important idea using three terminologies, not only one: ceasefire, cessation of hostilities, and cessation of military activities. So each one of these terminologies has its own legal reference. The most important part of the story is, instead of calling for ceasefire, let the same people who gathered in Munich exert serious pressure on the Turkish regime, the Saudi regime, and the Qatari regime, and others, the French, the British, to stop their support to the terrorists in Syria, and to implement and to commit themselves to the Security Council resolutions 2170, 2178, 2199, 2253. We have already an arsenal that would be capable of helping the Syrian government and its genuine allies to counter the terrorism in Syria. But by playing double game, you cannot combat the terrorist. On the contrary, you are supporting the terrorist by turning around the issue and by not addressing the challenge face to face and directly. Thank you so much.
Ambassador, one point to clarify.